Welcome to the Leadership Lyceum, a CEO's virtual mentor. Now, here's your host, Tom Lindquist.
Glad to have you back in the Leadership Lyceum, where we bring you direct access to top CEOs and directors of boards in an interview format that provides insight on situational issues that confront CEOs every day. It is a CEO's virtual mentor. Welcome to episode 23 and the beginning of season 4 of a CEO's virtual mentor. I'd like to express our special thanks to the clients of Lyceum Leadership Consulting that have enabled us to bring you this podcast, and to you, ladies and gentlemen, our devoted listenership, for your continued encouragement and programming suggestions. And let me mention that we cannot improve without your feedback and suggestions. Please take a moment and subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast platform and rate us with your feedback. There are two main features on our program today. We occasionally feature a spot on the program called Famous Last Words. We'll intersperse excerpts of a dramatic scene from the 1956 movie Patterns through the breaks in our program. Patterns' brilliant screenplay was written by Rod Serling of Twilight Zone fame. The Patterns script predated Twilight Zone and is considered by many as the finest piece of writing Rod Serling has ever done, and brought him instant acclaim. We'll feature the dramatic scene between ruthless, cold, and calculating owner of the corporation, Walter Ramsey, played by Everett Sloane, and youthful, charismatic, and considerate industrial engineer Fred Staples, played by Van Heflin. Ramsey is impressed with the performance of Fred Staples at a company Ramsey has recently acquired. Ramsey's grooming Staples to replace the struggling but highly principled Bill Briggs, played by Ed Begley, as the second in command at the company. But for our main event in the program, I'm joined by Richard Burke, Chairman and CEO of publicly traded solid waste services company Advanced Disposal Services. We'll be discussing Richard's leadership in a company that delivers a service punch well above its $1.6 billion weight class. We'll cover its evolution from private equity-backed roll-up of solid waste businesses through its IPO in October of 2016, and right up to just prior to the announcement on April 15, 2019, that Waste Management would purchase Advanced Disposal. We'll be right back after this to join my conversation with Richard Burke. I'm here in Ponte Vedra, just outside of Jacksonville, Florida, on actually a perfect late winter day, about 68 degrees and sunny, here with Richard Burke, Chairman and CEO of Advanced Disposal Services. Thank you for hosting me today, Richard.
Yeah, Tom, thanks for coming to see us.
Advanced Disposal is a New York Stock Exchange listed $1.6 billion revenue solid waste services company that competes against larger publicly traded rivals like $15 billion Waste Management and $10 billion Republic Services. Advanced Disposal has had a history of growth through acquisition under private equity ownership that led to its IPO in October of 2016. We'll discuss the exciting evolution of the company today in this program. Richard has been in the solid waste business his entire career since college graduation. He began his career at Waste Management and held a variety of roles during his 12 years at Waste Management. He joined Veolia Environmental Services in 1999 and was promoted to CEO and president of Veolia Environmental Services Solid Waste in 2007, and that lasted through 2012 when Advanced Disposal purchased Veolia's solid waste business in 2012. And Richard has been president since 2012 and CEO, I believe, since 2014.
Correct.
I actually recall us meeting over dinner. That was a nice summer evening, enjoying that together with a view over Grant Park and Lake Michigan. What's hard to believe, Richard, is that's probably in the 2012 timeframe. So could it be 7 years ago that we first met one another?
I believe it has been 7 years, and it was a much warmer night in Chicago than it probably is tonight.
Yes, it was at that. I thought we'd begin with setting a quick background for the discussion, and especially for the listener, on how the solid waste business makes money and drives profitability.
Solid waste is a service infrastructure company. So we collect waste and we collect recycling from your home, we call it residential, from industrial customers, from commercial customers, In our best markets, we're able to then internalize that waste that we collect into our own treatment facilities, whether that be a recycling plant where we source, separate, and sell for a secondary use, or whether we take it to one of the 41 landfills that we use. So we service about 2.8 million residential customers a week, multiple services per house, so it's nearly 8 million services a week. We service roughly about 220,000 commercial and industrial customers. So it's over 17 states. No one customer is more than 2% of our revenue. So we have a lot of small ticket sales spread over many, many customers.
How does the revenue flow?
Sure. So let's just take one subset. Let's take residential and think about residential. The majority of our residential is 800 municipal contracts, and they vary in size from as small as 100 homes in a small town to as many as 125,000 homes in the city of Detroit. So spread over 17 states. Typically, those would be paid through the individual homeowner's property tax. So we would submit one invoice and we would get one check. We would put out the right amount of equipment and people. We would collect the waste from your house, the recycling, the bulk, and then we would treat that waste however the city deemed appropriate to treat it. That's the majority of the residential. On the commercial side, most of the commercial is a one-off contract. It's an individual contract between us and the commercial business. Think small retail, think small restaurant, think of those kind of small businesses that we service. And again, we have about 220,000 of those small businesses spread over our platform. So that's how we make money, is small tickets. On the commercial side, our average customer pays us about $150 a month, but we create route density. And by picking up route density and then internalizing that waste, that's how we generate our profits.
And how do you pick up route density? How can you pack more into an area for a driver?
So we do it two ways. First, the way we do it is organically. So we have a sales team on the street. So they know what our routes would be. So it's a simple goal. Least number of miles, most stops. If I can run 100 miles and pick up 100 stops, including dumping the truck, that's great. So the cheapest way to do it and the best way to grow density is organically with our salespeople. The second way we do it is through acquisition. So we will buy mom and pop, basically organizations in these markets. We can tuck their customers into existing routes and build route density that way. Since we put the company together, Advanced Disposal, in 2012, we've averaged one tuck-in acquisition a month since we've done that. Now, they can be very small. They can be anywhere from $500,000 to a $10 to $15 million acquisition, with the majority being $2 to $3 million. But we will buy those companies. We're able to roll up their customers into our existing routes, create route density.
In a densely populated city, you mentioned Detroit, where you might have one residence on this side of the block receiving services, but I see that often there's areas within a pocket where other service providers are providing the service. In order to pack more density, are you then dealing with the city for that in terms of those?
So when we're talking residential, there's two ways we go to market with residential. The majority of it would be a municipal contract where you have every house, where you compete on a long-term bid, 5-10-year bid, and you have every house. So once you win that bid for the next 5 to 10 years, whatever the term is, you pick up every house, so there is no competitor across the street. Only about 5% of our business is what we call subscription. So that's more like your cable bill at home, where we're actively competing in certain markets where there are other haulers on the street. But in that case, you compete, right? You compete. So you have to give a better quality service in order to win that work from your competition. But it's a small part of our business. When we talk density building, we're thinking more about the commercial and industrial side of the business than we are the residential. We will get density in residential through the municipal contracts. Where we're really seeking density is in the commercial small container from 2 to 8 yard business. And the issue there is that's the highest barrier to entry on the collection side of the business for us, for our industry. The trucks are expensive. That's a $350,000 truck, and each container is somewhere between $500 to $1,000. So In order to start a front-load commercial route, it's about $1 million startup, and it could be about 18 to 20 months before you're profitable on that route. So you're not, unless you're a pretty well-funded organization, you're not going to start your business with commercial. It's more of the established groups that have that. So that's the barrier to entry. So with the barrier to entries there, the profitability on the commercial is the highest of the collection because the barrier to entry, there's less people in it.
We'll be right back with Richard Burke, Chairman and CEO of Advanced Disposal Services. We take you now to patterns and into the dramatic scene between the ruthless owner Walter Ramsey, played by Everett Sloane, and youthful, charismatic industrial engineer Fred Staples, played by Van Heflin. The scene takes place during a dinner party in the home of Fred and Nancy Staples. Nancy is played by Beatrice Straight. Walter Ramsey is using their study for privacy to conduct some business, and Fred's wife Nancy encourages Walter to preview a strategic report that her husband Fred Staples has developed with some collaboration from Bill Briggs. The report charts pathways for the future direction of the company. Walter is impressed with the report and engages Fred and Fred's study in private conversation about the report and his leadership prospects with Ramsey's company.
Some interesting reading matter here, Fred. Very interesting reading. I took the liberty of accepting your wife's kind invitation to look over your report.
Oh, really?
Good, heady stuff. Good, solid thinking. And some of it is better than good. Of course, I can't say that I agree with all your conclusions, but I listen to arguments. It'll be good to hear arguments for a change. Good arguments.
Well, I can't tell you what a relief that is. We really sweat that one out.
Fred, I like a man to show initiative. I like a man who's not afraid to think a new thought, to take a different kind of step on his own. With your permission, I'll borrow this extra copy of your report just overnight. But for now, I can say I'm very impressed.
Well, of course, we haven't finished this thing yet, but Bill and I feel that another week...
Bill? You mean Briggs?
Yes, sir. Well, we work together on this.
Oh, come now, Staples. I pride myself on my sense for style. I can link what I see with what I know to be peculiar to a certain individual. And I know Bill Briggs' work. I've been exposed to it since I was of voting age. This isn't his style. It isn't his brand of thinking.
Well, I don't know what Nancy could have told you, but Bill and I work together.
Fred, learn to accept success. It's tougher sometimes than learning to accept failure. Don't take half of your accomplishment and hand it out gratuitously to the man on your left who hasn't the stuff to do it on his own. That's charitable, humane, and it makes you feel good. But it's not business.
Mr. Ramsey, I'd like to clear up one point.
There'll be a meeting on Tuesday, Fred. We can discuss the report then.
I assure you I don't want any undue credit.
I never extend undue credit. Ask anybody. Ask your friend Briggs. You think I'm tough on him, don't you? I am tough on him.
Well, I think Bill is... I think he's a good man.
He was. And grandfather clocks were good clocks, and Stanley steamers were good automobiles, but you can't run them in competition today.
I must say that I like some of his ideas very much. Very much indeed.
So do I. Some of them. Not many.
Still, a man with Bill's experience and... I don't know, I think he'd be very hard to replace. I'll see if that coffee's ready.
Are you serious, Fred? Briggs would be hard to replace? Do you honestly think that? Then why do you think I brought you on here from Mansfield on such short notice? Do you think that was a whim? Is that what you think? Fred, you're Briggs' replacement. I thought you understood that. I'm expecting his resignation. I don't like to prolong these things. They're unpleasant and personal no matter what tack you use. And under no circumstances could I or would I undertake to fire him.
Coffee's in the living room. I thought perhaps you'd like to go in there. It's quiet.
Look at the time. I really must go. It's been a wonderful evening.
We're back with Richard Burke, Chairman and CEO of Advanced Disposal Services. On the landfill side, how does that work into the economics?
So the landfill side is the most profitable part of the equation for us. Typically, landfill EBITDA margins are in that 50 to 70%. Now, they are quite capital intensive. It can take as much as 10 to 15% of your revenue each year for cell construction, leachate collection, and gas systems. But at the end of the day, your conversion of EBITDA to free cash flow is very high. There's a scarcity to landfills, not a scarcity to volume. There's no floating barge out there scaring everyone that there's not going to be landfills. There's plenty of airspace available, but there's a scarcity to the number of landfills in the United States. It's hard to cite a new one. So what has become is existing ones are bigger, they're more regional in nature, they're further away from the waste mass, but that scarcity creates profitability as well.
And what are you able to do? What levers do you pull in terms of the distance from the mass?
We look at markets three ways, and our favorite market when we think about market selection is secondary vertically integrated markets. So think of a city between 25,000 and 150,000 people. That's a sweet spot for us. That's our niche compared to some of those bigger competitors you talked about in the intro. Mm-hmm. They like the primary markets, the urban markets. We prefer the secondary markets where we're vertically integrated and we can be the one or two player in that market. We find in that markets that our labor's better. We find in that market that relationships matter more with our customers. We find in those markets that pricing is better and that the customer relationship is stickier. So 65% of our revenue actually comes from what we view as a secondary vertically integrated market. We've worked hard since we put the company together in late 12 to reconfigure our revenue base to fit that we want to be in that 65 to 70% secondary vertically integrated because that's the highest return on invested capital for us. And it creates a niche that our bigger competitors don't have. And then because for them, those markets are small and they don't add up to much when you're 15 billion, but we're 1.6 billion. So if I do a $5 million tuck-in acquisition, it's meaningful. It's 35 or 40 basis points of growth for me. For them, it's a rounding error. So in many of those secondary markets, I'm not competing with them for customers or acquisitions.
So these smaller acquisitions that you've done in the past fit this kind of a mold then? They
do, and they're extremely accretive done right. Again, we close about one a month, so we're pretty good at them. There's still quite a roll-up play, especially in the secondary markets. We've determined there's about $2 billion of revenue in the white space that both exists in our market and in contiguous markets to where we are that we'll attack over the next few years.
I see. So contiguous aspects then are critical for you. As you look at these smaller markets, you're looking at adjacencies to those markets, geographic adjacencies.
Geographic adjacencies are huge because the way we think about it, in most markets, if we have our disposal or recycling network at the center, we can service with our collection fleet about 50 miles around those treatment centers. And that's great. So you get great market share in that 50 miles, and that's the first thing you attack. And then on the outward perimeter, you place transfer stations. So transfer stations would be a big building where smaller trucks can come and you consolidate loads and move them off to the treatment facility. If we're able to, in this fictitious model I'm talking about, if we're able to have the disposal treatment center at the middle and service the 50-mile radius, if I put 2 transfer stations north and south around, then I expand that market by another 25 or 30 miles, knowing that I'm going to touch it twice. So I'm going to transfer it in. So the net revenue per ton is going to be a bit lower, but it's going to be incremental ton to those disposal sites, so the profitability can be just as high. And that's the way we attack the secondary markets, and that's how we grow the secondary markets. Some of my competitors don't believe that there's enough growth in the secondary markets. Well, there's not if you just are satisfied with the 50-mile radius around your site. you've got to expand that market presence, and you've got to take it out and start linking small towns together.
How much of that calculus is done by intuition and how much is done by GPS and software technologies? Has that improved in terms of your decision making in the industry?
Oh, absolutely. No, look, we're using technology to map out opportunities, and the reason we know there's $2 billion of revenue out there is because we've been able to map it out and make it part of our CRM database. So, we know who's out there. We know where they are. We know sort of where they fit. So we build relationships with those owners, and when they're ready, we want to be the chosen one when they're ready.
I see. What do they think about typically?
Oh, look, I mean, when somebody sells, it's usually death, disabilities, debt, or as we say, don't have a successor. So it's the 4 Ds.
4 Ds.
It's the 4 Ds, right? And that's normally what prompts someone to sell their small business. But again, these are good, hardworking people who in many cases have fed their families and raised their children, working hard, running trucks, and finally they got enough money in that maybe they didn't have to drive them every day. We have a high degree of respect for these people, and we like to integrate their companies in a socially responsible way where we value the brand they've created in their market. So we don't rush to change the name. We don't rush to change their colors. We don't rush to do those things in the market, because in the small towns that they're in, if they've been there for 25 or 30 years, their brand matters. Mm-hmm. And that's part of what you're buying. So we believe it's better to check our ego at the door and just be respectful of the former owner. I mean, the best testimonial we can have for the next deal is the last deal. So when we're closing the next deal and that gentleman and his wife or spouse sitting across the table, if they say, how are you going to treat our people? It's nice to be able to slide your phone across the table and say, call the guy 30 miles down the road. If you can do that, then you can grow a market.
And you would say that you all have a reputation in this way of transacting or this way of acquiring?
It's better for others to answer that question than me, but we have quite a list of testimonials of former owners who are more than willing to make those phone calls.
We'll be right back with Richard Burke, Chairman and CEO of Advanced Disposal Services. We join back into our conversation on the subject of private equity's interest in the environmental waste sector. When you consider Macquarie and their entry into the solid waste business, and they're interested in that, High Star originally with Advanced, what were they seeing? And how does that differ, or how does that parallel what you saw over the years, Richard, as opportunities?
I think they were seeing a highly defensive sector. And you have a recession, everybody feels it. I'm not saying the garbage guys don't feel the recession. We do, but not to the same level as most. So I think they were seeing highly defensive. I think they were also seeing the roll-up ability, the ability to buy a platform like Macquarie did, or a platform like High Star did with ADS and IWS back years ago, and then use that platform to then grow the business. I think if you look back, the High Stars and the Macquaries have done quite well with their investment. Now, it's not a short time horizon, though. Macquarie's been an 8 to 10 year hold on most of the things they've had, and High Star did the same with us. They made their original purchase of IWS in 2005, Advanced in 2006, and then they bought Veolia, where I was CEO, in 2012. And then when we went public in 2016, they stayed about 6 months until we could do 2 secondaries offerings in order to create value to take them out. They were in 10 years as well. So they're not short holds, they're long holds.
Mm-hmm. And you're saying long holds really in relation to what we typically would think private equity's interest would be when you say that?
Yes, I mean, look, I know that private equity, there are many different cultures out there from different private equity, but your 3 to 5 year holds, this doesn't seem to be the right business for that. Mm-hmm. You're going to pay a fairly decent number for a platform, and time and tuck-in acquisitions and sound strategy and organic growth are going to need to take place in order for you to create the value for the dollars you put up front.
And you didn't see them as reluctant 8 to 10-year holds. You saw them as understanding that it would require that in this infrastructure services type business.
I did. Yeah, I did. And look, we didn't feel any pressure to go fast with them, nor did they apply any pressures. From day one, they said this is an 8 to 10-year hold.
I see. From my angle, that's what I always understood that to be too. It was part of their infrastructure investments, which were longer tenured types investments, and the patient capital is what they were espousing, I guess.
I think patient capital is a good way to put it. Look, Hostar was a great partner for us. We wouldn't have been able to do what we did without them. They were very good to provide cash along the way, to allow us to grow, to allow us to continue to invest in the company, both in a capital growing organically, as well as a capital to continue to do tuck-in acquisitions. So they were actively engaged in the board and actively engaged in the strategy of the company, but we were aligned. We wouldn't be who we are today without the fact that Hostar Capital was very much involved with this company from 2006. Even before me, I only saw it since 2012, but they were great partners.
And when you say couldn't have done it without them, what would be some of the alternatives that you would have faced back at that time?
They provided access to capital was the best thing they provided us. They also provided strategic guidance, and helped us with our balance sheet, thinking through how to work that. They didn't put a lot of debt on the company, but they were able to help us walk through that process. I think if we'd have been totally dependent upon bank debt alone, we wouldn't have gotten there.
Describe that.
I would have been paying interest back at such a rate that I would not have had the excess capital to grow.
Interesting. How about dividend requirements? Was that a pull ever?
They took zero. They took no dividend. I was actually quite surprised, even working for Veolia for 12 years like I did, they found a way to take a dividend back to France. So I was a bit shocked when I came to work for Equity and they took no dividend. They had a big first day and a big last day, but in between, they took nothing.
That's really interesting. At Veolia, where you're under a global conglomerate, they're asking for upstreaming dividends, and that can be more challenging than patient private equity with long-term hold parameter.
It was challenging, but it was refreshing to get here and not have that obligation. And to be with a group that wanted to grow, that understood that in order for them to have a good exit for their LPs, we needed to grow. So they didn't stand in the way of that growth by saddling us with unreasonable dividends.
Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with Richard Burke, Chairman and CEO of Advanced Disposal Services.
Sorry you have to leave so soon.
I really must. My coat, I think, is in the bedroom.
Oh, yes, of course. I'll get it for you.
May I make a suggestion?
Mr. Ramsey, I don't want to seem ungrateful.
I'm not looking for gratitude. You can't run a business on thank you notes. That's Briggs' trouble. And God forgive me, that was my father's trouble too. This incredible conception of a huge industry being run like a soup kitchen, like a welfare comfort station. I know what the old-timers think of me. I've grown up getting stared at by a lot of tongue-clucking old fogies who find me ruthless. Kind of people who represent everything that might have kept our business from growing to anything like its present size. This stupid black and white idea that honesty and fair profit are incompatible. I just happen to feel that the atmosphere of a large corporation cannot be constantly cathedral-like. Thank you, Mrs. Staples.
We're back with Richard Burke, Chairman and CEO of Advanced Disposal Services. We rejoined the conversation discussing the transactions that led to the scale of the company today. You mentioned the timeline of the transactions. 2005 was the Interstate Waste Services acquisition. 2012 was the Veolia Solid Waste North America acquisition.
The only thing you're missing in that timeline is 2006, Highstar bought Advanced Disposal, the legacy Advanced Disposal company.
Got it.
So you think 2005 Interstate Waste, 2006 Advanced Disposal in separate funds, and then 2012 bought Veolia, merged all three into one fund, and then we lived like that until October 6, 2016 when we did our IPO.
Got it. I list a subplot here that may not have been a subplot at all, and that was Oaktree and Highstar coming together. Was that apparent to you at all from your...
Oaktree did buy Highstar, but they did not buy our fund. So while our managing partner was pulled a bit, it was really a non-event for us.
And then CPPIB from Canada came aboard in August of 2016 with, I think, a $280 million investment.
That's correct.
What was their thesis? Were they buying into the same thesis as Highstar and others in the industry had, or was it slightly different? Do you recall?
I do. It was strategic on our part, or we thought we were going to go public in the late third, early fourth quarter of 16. So we went out and sought pre-IPO money, and we wanted to get somebody with great credibility in the market and in the street. So we sought out a number of groups similar to CPPIB, and they were the winner, right? They came in with the best offer for a pre-IPO deal to come in with an infusion of cash. To use a real technical terms, that really greased the skid for the IPO in October.
Why does that grease the skids for that?
Well, a group like CPPIB that's greatly respected, for them to come in and do an extreme amount of due diligence. They brought in Bain, and Bain lived with us for 30 days and dove very deep into our company. And they got very comfortable with not only the business as it stood then, but what they knew we could do with it. So to get that and to make that part of your story when you're doing your roadshow for your IPO, we thought that was worth the pre-IPO discount to bring them on.
Got it. You got a good board member on.
I had a great board member. Yeah, I did. They're our largest shareholder. He's also my lead director. We have a great working relationship.
We're talking about Michael Cohn from Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, or CPPIB. I enjoyed getting to know him years ago very much.
University of Chicago. He's a booth guy like you.
Yeah.
I figured you two might hit it off.
And how did the management team come together over the time of those foundational transactions?
So from a management team standpoint, it's a homogenized team. While we were coming together as three companies and trying to make one, out of it, we thought it was really important not to have any one conquering hero mentality, that we truly chose the best of the best out of the group in order to make up the management team. So I came in as CEO in 2014. Steve has been the CFO of the company since 2006. He has great history of the business. John Spiegel is our COO, and John's got over 30 years in the business, BFI Allied, and was recently, as recent as a week ago, named to the Waste Industry Association's Hall of Fame.
Oh, fantastic.
So he will be inducted in the Hall of Fame in May, so that's pretty exciting.
Where's the event in May? Is it in
Las Vegas?
Okay.
And then Mike Slattery, our general counsel. Mike was with me at Veolia. He's been with me since 2004. So it was a new management team, but at the same time, it was sort of pieces of everyone. And the same thing with the leadership in the field. We thought it was really best to take the best of the best, but make sure that we were all wearing the Advanced Disposal brand, not the other brands.
Did that come together? A lot of times that carryover is people feel that they've come from this company or that company. This is the way we've always done it, or...
Look, I think it's people's natural tendency to want to talk historically, but we moved past it pretty fast as an organization. But we were very purposeful about it, and we were engaged a lot in the field and engaged in the local operating locations We rebranded the company quickly. We got all the other logos out as fast as we could. Now, a little different than the tuck-in acquisitions, but when you do these three, we got all the old stuff out as quick as we possibly could. And we were very purposeful about all operating under the banner of advanced disposal. So we came out with core values, our ethics policy. Culture matters a lot in our business and in our company. So we were really pushing the culture of the business. And it goes back to 4 words: service first, safety always. So those are the 4 words that you'll see all around our building and all around all of our locations and on our trucks. And we wanted people to rally around the brand, but also to rally around that tagline that it didn't matter if you'd been here a week or 30 years. If somebody said, what's advanced disposal all about? They're about service first and safety always. And the reason we say safety always is it's too important to be ranked. Service is first, but you never get to service unless you have a safe process. So the truck doesn't leave the yard to go surface unless there's a safe process, which means a safe driver, a trained driver, and a well-maintained truck. So safety's always, and it's the umbrella that sits over. Too important to be ranked.
It actually makes so much sense. It doesn't matter if you're in your business or any business that's dealing with the public and an industrial kind of risk, on an industrial risk level basis. It should always be that.
It shouldn't be ranked. It's too important to be ranked. You're talking about people and you're talking about people's lives, not just your employees, but also all the people we come in contact with in the community. So we try every day. We start every day with safety huddles in all of our locations. Every day we start with a safety huddle. Look everybody in the eye. Everybody ready to go to work? Do you have the right equipment? Have you been trained properly? Is your truck in good working order?
Who came up with that idea? How did that evolve?
15 years ago. It really bothered me when I see safety first. I think it's too important to be ranked. So what do you tell me? Service is second? Service isn't second, it's our business. If we don't service people, then we don't get paid and we don't stay in business. So service in a service business has to be first. But safety's way more important, right? You never get to the service aspect of your business unless you have this umbrella of safety around everything else. So service first, safety always. I've had the tagline for about 15 years. And our goal here is we have about 6,000 people on the team. If somebody asks the question, what's advanced disposal all about? If I can just get 6,000 people to say service first, safety always, it's the home run answer. It's the absolute home run answer. Not there yet, but we're trying every day. 6,000 people, just say service first, safety always.
That's great. Service first, safety always. We'll be right back with Richard Burke, Chairman and CEO of Advanced Disposal Services.
And again, thanks for a wonderful evening. I'll see you in the morning, friend. You didn't steal that promotion. You won it. Remember that.
Good night, Mr. Ramsey. I hope you'll come soon again.
Thank you, Nancy. I hope I'll be able to. Good night.
Good night.
We're back with Richard Burke, Chairman and CEO of Advanced Disposal Services. We rejoined the conversation discussing the board composition in the post-IPO and beyond stage of the company.
When we evolved from being part independent, part equity, sort of the strange period, to what I would say now is a totally independent board. So you have 6 independent board members and myself for a total of 7. So you're setting up your committees with audit and governance, nominating, and compensation. So quite frankly, we spent the end of 16 and really all of 17 getting the board organized where we are now. And I've really enjoyed the process. We started with a skills assessment. We basically looked at the company and said, all right, look, here's the strategy. We're gonna grow in vertically integrated way in secondary markets. We're going to compete in primary, and we're going to chase disposal neutral. So those are the three markets. So what are the critical tactics within that strategy in order to grow the company? Okay, it's this, 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 and this. So we said, all right, how does that lay out with the skills we have in the company? So where are we strong and where are we weak? So we looked at that internally with our own leadership team and made some changes there. But we also used that same skills matrix with our board. We said, look, we're going to do tuck-in acquisitions. It's part of our DNA. It makes sense. It's how we grow route density. So we need a board member who we believe his history was an expert, or at least was around a lot of small M&A acquisitions. So we went out and found a gentleman. Ernie Mrozak joined us. He had been at ServiceMaster for years as both COO and CFO, and had been responsible for over 300 tuck-in acquisitions. So his experience was vital to us, very important that we had him. We also looked and said, what's in all of our tactics and all of our strategies, what's the one thing that's critical? People. So we said, all right, personnel development. How are we going to take people in this time where there's a shortage on drivers, shortage on mechanics? How do we create career paths for people that might be coming in that don't even have a commercial driver's license? How do we show a career that gets them to a helper, to a driver, to a route supervisor, to a manager that would be something different? So we said, well, look, we needed to make some changes internally to our HR leadership, and we did that. But we also went out and found an HR expert. Tanuja Denny was the former VP of People and Assistant General Counsel and Chief of Staff at NRG Energy. So her background in personnel and people development was a nice addition. Those are a couple examples. The other one we looked at was we have a lot of coastal towns and cities that we service and operate in. And as climate is changing, and we're having more and more 100-year storms seem to be occurring every year. So I'm not sure, I think we need to change the name of those 100-year storms, by the way. We said, do we have anybody that we can bring to the board that has had experience dealing with natural disasters? So we were able to attract Renee Conley, who is the former president and CEO of Louisiana Power and Light, who managed through Katrina and spent a couple years rebuilding the power grid south of Baton Rouge to New Orleans. I mean, we hope we never experience anything that horrific. But in case we do, we wanted to have the skills on the board to help us think through how we plan for such a crisis and how, if such a crisis happens in our operations, that we're prepared. So we were very deliberate about the skill sets we were looking for to build out this board. We also wanted to have a former CEO, really to help me, right? So we had been public since 2016, so I wanted someone on the board that had lived some of the things that a publicly traded CEO faces. So we were able to attract Michael Hoffman, the former CEO of Toro. One of the things I really love about Michael is, one, he was at Toro for 41 years, 11 years as CEO, but he began as a service technician. So I'm a garbage man. So for me to be a garbage man, to have a service tech who became a CEO, there's a lot of similarities. He's certainly a mentor to me and someone I look up to. So to have him one phone call away is very helpful to say, Michael, were you ever faced with this? And even if you weren't, can we talk this through? Because he's a very smart man, he's a very logical thinker. And the thing I love about him is he always puts people first. So that's been very helpful to have on our board.
You talked about skill assessment that applied to the management team. Were there any shift in leadership requirements or focus and approach in the post-IPO setting?
On the accounting and compliance side, we had to grow and mature our internal audit group. We went out and sought a VP of internal audit who had public company experience, and then allowed him to build a team around from an internal audit perspective. We did the same thing with our head of IT. because we wanted to make sure that we had the proper controls in our IT department. So we brought in another gentleman who was a former head of IT at a publicly traded company, and all the way up to our chief accounting officer. While everything was fine, the requirements of public and the filings with the SEC, the K's and Q's you have to do, we thought it was important to have someone who this wasn't their first time doing it. So we did make quite a few changes at the senior level in order to be prepared to be a publicly traded company. And it's worked. We've learned a lot. They've taught us a lot. The people that we brought in, we've taught them the waste business, and they've taught us life in a public company. So we've each taught each other some things.
Is it difficult to bring in outsiders into a new environment?
We have a pretty extensive hiring process. I hate to simplify this, but we don't hire jerks. We screen very carefully. It's a bit of a consensus hiring around here. I get last say, but I like to get the input of everybody on the floor before we bring somebody in at that level.
We'll be right back to discuss Richard's individual leadership and the conclusion of our program. We're back with Richard Burke, Chairman and CEO of Advanced Disposal Services, and the conclusion of the program. Rounding into the Bell lap here, I wanted to talk about your individual leadership, and you alluded to it a little bit with Michael Hoffman and the mentorship that he provides, and you all each coming from what you would describe maybe as humble beginnings. Are you drawing on your upbringing frequently?
First, I hate to talk about me.
I know you do.
It's not a subject that anybody should spend very much time on. I grew up humble, hardworking, grew up on a farm. We worked all the time, and we thought everybody else did too. It was a great way to grow up. You learn such wonderful values about winning and losing. If you farm, you lose about as much as you win, so you learn both. How to work with people from everywhere, diversity. We didn't know it was diverse, but you learn to have a pretty diverse perspective on the world when you grow up that way, which I think has been nothing but helpful to me in my life. And it wasn't such a stretch to go from being farm to being in the waste business. I started as a manager trainee right out of college. Still probably my favorite people in the company are the drivers and mechanics. I feel much more comfortable sitting at a picnic table with them under a shade tree, having a conversation about their families than I do sitting in a boardroom, but I have to do both. But my favorite day would be with them. They're the ones that make the company go, and some of their stories are incredible, the things they've overcome to be successful in their life.
What about influences in your life?
My family's probably been the greatest mentor I had. Again, we grew up working, and we grew up treating people with respect, being kind to each other, setting big goals, not being afraid to take on challenges, but at the same time doing it the right way. Winning with character and integrity was a big part of it. I've also been very blessed in my career, both at Waste Management and at Veolia, to have some phenomenal leaders who at a very early age gave me challenges greater than my ability and allowed me to make some mistakes and then taught me along the way. I tell our people now, we have a group of designated high potential people, and I when I counsel our managers, I'm like, let them fail a little bit. Don't let them hurt anybody, don't let them hurt themselves. Try to minimize the financial impact, but let them stumble a little bit and then mentor them, coach them, and they'll never forget it. Many times you learn as much from what you don't do well as what you do really well.
Absolutely. But it also requires that person there to coach them through it and accept it, but coach them through it in the right way.
No doubt, no doubt. I think the best leaders are those that celebrate their team's wins and accept the defeats as their own. They win, I lose. I think that's the way you're supposed to lead.
I'm just going to mention it, but your grandfather's business, you were involved with him. I imagine that taught you sort of the rudiments of business then too.
It did. We weren't afraid to make money, but again, we did it the right way. But yes, I was able to to watch him sell, to watch him interact with people, to watch him put fairness above all else. But at the same time, he had a family to feed too. So
Was it a Texaco business?
Mobile.
Excuse me.
No, very good. Great memory. Now, we had a mobile heating oil distributorship, and then we also had a farm and a sawmill. So we had all three parts. So we were diverse before it was cool. All that meant was that when it rained and you couldn't farm, you could still do the other two. So he just didn't want any wasted days in your life. So you could end up at the sawmill or at the heating oil company if it was raining outside. I think that was more of his plan. He was a man with an 8th grade education, probably one of the best business people I ever met, in looking back.
How old were you when you started working with him?
I think I was doing tickets in what we called tickets. They were the distribution tickets for the oil, and you had to balance the truck. I think I was 10. I think I started at 10. And that was before they'd let me go out in the fields and work. And then probably 12 or 13, I was out in the fields dealing with cattle and dealing with everything else. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of that way the rest of the time. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I don't think I would have the opportunities I've had in my life if I hadn't grown up that way.
Yeah, I can see where the respect for and the comfort with the drivers and the people close to the action are.
They want the same things we want in life. They want to give their kids a better life than they had. They want to take a vacation. They want a decent home. They want a decent car. And most importantly, they want to be treated with respect. And if you give that as an employer or as a friend, you get a lot back.
This has been excellent. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed this episode with Richard Burke, Chairman and CEO of Advanced Disposal Services. Given the April 15, 2019 announcement of the acquisition of the company by Waste Management, we hope this interview may be a bit of a swan song for Richard Burke and Advanced Disposal. I'd like to express our special thanks to the clients of Lyceum Leadership Consulting that enable us to bring you this podcast. And let me mention once again that we cannot improve without your feedback and suggestions. Please take a moment and subscribe in iTunes or on your favorite podcast platform and rate us with your feedback. We'll be back in mid-July with our next episode, episode 24. In the meantime, happy Independence Day, ladies and gentlemen. We now part from the program with the conclusion of the dramatic study scene in Patterns with Van Heflin and Beatrice Straight. Patterns is available on YouTube.
Good night, Mr. Ramsey. I hope you'll come soon again.
Thank you, Nancy. I hope I'll be able to. Good night.
Good night. What was that all about?
I'm Bill Briggs' replacement.
A vice presidency.
You must have really spread it on.
Listen, a little rare roast beef and wifely pride don't get you that kind of a promotion.
Yeah, I'll take something a little more. A little misrepresentation for one thing. A little switch in authorship for another. You told him I'd written that report.
I did not. I told him Bill had helped you.
But Nancy, this is Bill's basic idea.
Oh, the same set of ideas that he's had for years. I gathered that much. You gave it life, you made it work, you made it practical.
Even so, Nancy, I don't want any part of it.
Oh, Fred, I happen to know what you contributed to this. I also know that you can't stand winning if you have even a nodding acquaintance with a loser.
I don't like stepping on another human being to get into a capital gains bracket. Ramsey's stalking that poor guy like an animal. He'll whip him to death if he has to make him resign.
I didn't hear you tell Mr. Ramsey that he was mistaken. I didn't hear any clear-cut defense of Mr. Briggs. If you don't want to be successful, go and tell that to
Nancy,
Mr. Ramsey. He'll give you a broom,
please?
and you can check in at 7 o'clock every night, but don't tell me.
Look, I don't want to argue about this.
Neither do I. I just want you to answer me. Did you tell him that your wife was mistaken? Did you tell him that you were taking vows for something you did not do?
No. No, I didn't.
Why not, Fred? Why not?
Because I want the job.
Thank you for a straight and honest answer. Now I think we can both sleep tonight.
Leadership Lyceum, a CEO's virtual mentor, has been a production of the Leadership Lyceum, LLC, copyright 2019, all rights reserved.